Hello, my name is Evangeline Reed. I am the Instructional Services Librarian here at Aurora University, and today I'm going to be talking about how you can research a community. This will help you do research for several different social work classes. It is important when you're doing this type of research to find really high quality information. You want the very best information. You want to feel very confident in that information so that you then are able to build off of it to create really substantial fact-based arguments about what the community needs and how you can help them. Today, we're going to talk about different places you can look and then specifically look at two tools, one that will help you research demographics and one that will help you research your workforce. There is a research guide for social work 4010, as well as the other social work class that does this topic. I believe it is social work 6380. Does that sound right? Both of them actually have almost exactly the same information, and we'll be looking at a lot of these resources today. I highly encourage you to take a closer look at these sources and use them to navigate to some really high quality resources. So before you can start researching a community, you first need to think about who your community is. And by that, I mean, where does your community fall? It's part of other communities and segments of the population. If we were using Aurora, Illinois as our example, we could say that it is part of a state, Illinois. It is also part of a larger metropolitan area. Some people might say the Chicago metropolitan area. We'll see some demographic data or other data that's labeled as Chicago, Naperville, Arlington Heights, or Chicago, Naperville, Elgin, depending on how those regions are defined. It's part of a county. In this case, Aurora, Illinois is part of many different counties, which is going to make your work a little bit harder, and it may not be as useful to find information on the county level for a community that is part of so many different counties. It's also part of geographic regions. So for example, Aurora, Illinois is part of the Fox River Valley region or the Fox Valley region. It's a city, Aurora, Illinois. Some communities will also be cities versus townships. Sometimes there can be those tiny distinctions that are important to pay attention to when you're looking at data. And then if you are working on an even smaller segment of the population, you may have a neighborhood. The reason why we want to do this type of brainstorming before we begin is because it will help us identify information that is about our community. So for example, let's say the Chicago metropolitan area was under a foot of snow. That would apply to Aurora, Illinois, just as much as any other part of that community, any part of that area, because they're in it. They would also be experiencing that foot of snow. Obviously, you're not really looking for anything as temporary as that foot of snow, but you can imagine that there can be conditions and issues that apply to larger sections of the community or larger geographic regions than just your specific community. And if you were to not include those, you might be missing out on important bits of information. And some information just simply is not subdivided as small as we would like it to be. So it may only apply to the broader region, and you may not be able to find something that's quite as specific as you would like. When it comes to times like that, take what you are able to find, and of course, feel free to ask a librarian to help you research a little bit further. Speaking of that, when you're researching, where should you look? This is the overarching question I will ask you to think about. Who cares? And I don't mean that in the sense that no one cares about your topic. I mean it in the sense that someone probably cares about the specific topic. So for example, let's say we want to know about the environment in Aurora, Illinois. Who cares about that? Well, there's a federal agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, that cares about the environment in all of the United States, right? And it's fair to say that unless there's particularly big crisis or problem, they may not have a ton of data that's specific to Aurora, Illinois, but they're likely to have some information. about the area that it belongs to. And if there is some sort of big crisis or some sort of particularly notable problem, they'll know about it probably. Then you start thinking more locally. The local health departments probably care about the environment because of the way that it affects the people. And that's probably something you're particularly interested in as well when you're researching your community. And you can also think about it from the other side. Park districts or other sorts of organizations that take care of land and such, they're going to care about about that environment, right? I'm sure you could find someone who would care about other specific things. For example, I ask my second question after we ask who cares about it is to think of specific elements within that topic. If we were to just search for the environment in Aurora, Illinois, I'm sure we would get some information, but we would probably find more and stronger information if we searched using specific types of things we might want to find. For example, the air quality in Aurora, Illinois, or the water quality or the pipes in Aurora, Illinois. And so, for example, with each of those more specific topics, I'm sure we could again think of organizations or people who might care about and thus have information about those specific topics. For example, I'm absolutely certain that there is some sort of organization whose job it is to manage and maintain the access to water and the quality of water and the pipes in Aurora. And so, as you can see, something that seems quite simple is already starting to branch out into quite a few more possibilities. And it's those types of possibilities and this type of creative thinking that helps us find what we're looking for. But when in doubt, come back to the idea of who cares about this topic. There are some ideas that work for most communities in America. For example, you probably want to start with the local government website. You probably want to look at some of the major organizations that are going to impact your community, things like a park district, a public library, the police. You'll notice the park district for Aurora, Illinois, I have two different websites listed, Fox Valley Park District and the Aurora Park District. Some of that is a hierarchy. Some of it is about the way that land is owned. For example, some land might be owned by a county or by some sort of other organization, even though it seems like it's in Aurora, Illinois. And the hierarchy could be, for example, you think of the sheriff on the state level and then the local police on a smaller level. So knowing these geographic regions can be very useful for finding information that's more holistic to help about the resources that serve your community. And then you might want to think about other types of things you're going to brainstorm. Things that there might not be just one of, although there was multiplicity of your park district, but things like food banks and shelters and resources for people who don't have enough of what they need to survive. Then you could think about things like cultural organizations. And so for those, you might think of examples that you might search for things like museums, historical societies, things like that, right? But those first four big ones, the local government, the park district, the public library, the police, those are ones that will apply to almost any community and will give you some really interesting information. Now, as you're searching online, you're going to encounter a lot of information. When you start with really well-trusted sources, so if you're on, the Aurora, Illinois government website, you're less likely to run into questionable quality, but it's still good to be vigilant and to think through the information you're looking at. That being said, how do you think through that source? I like the CRAAP test. It's a fun name, and it's a mnemonic that helps us remember some questions we have to ask of our source. One is the currency. This is relatively simple, right? We need to find when this information was created or last updated. If it's old, it's very likely going to be out of date or otherwise inaccurate. Things change, new things develop. Relevance asks us whether this is really going to help us answer our questions. And so for that, it's really helpful if you're working on a specific assignment to come back to your rubric. come back to the expectations for your assignment and the specific questions you're trying to answer. The authority. Who published this and who wrote it? Who created this information and who put it out into the world? If it's a source that other people trust, you might not trust it yourself if you don't know it, but if you're able to look it up and see that other people know and trust this source, that's a good sign. We also think about who wrote it. We're looking for people who have credentials or expertise on the topic. At the very least, that credential or expertise needs to be that they, live in and have experienced the thing that they're talking about. But we could also be looking for things like an official, someone who holds a office of authority, or someone who has an academic degree in the area that they're talking about. Accuracy is another really important one for this assignment. It's quite easy to throw out numbers and information, but what we really want is for people to give us the sources for that, for those facts that they're trying to share, or claims of any kind, whether or not they're statistical in nature. Where's the evidence? So whether that is a citation in formal, APA style, or they just tell you that they found this information from, say, a research study published by Stanford in 2012, you want to be able to confirm that they got that information from a solid source. Or if they found that information themselves, you want to feel like they are being transparent about how they created, collected, and analyzed that information. Their method should be shared, and you should be able to feel confident in it. When in doubt, you would want to verify that information in another place. So, for example, if the only website publishing this information is the one you found, it's less likely that that is the case, unless perhaps they are the absolute authority on the topic. Then perhaps you could overlook that. We also think about whether it was reviewed before publication. For example, on the most extreme end of things, we have something like Facebook or Twitter, where anyone can just publish the thought that comes into their head immediately, versus something like an article in the New York Times that has to go through an editor and a fact checker before they publish it. And they're sort of staking their, in this case, their authority as a known and trusted source on those facts being accurate. The last thing is purpose. We really want to be wary of information that is being shared or created to sell us something, or just to entertain us, or things that are really more based in opinion rather than facts. If we find something that is opinion-based, we could still use it as a source, saying that this is one perspective or one opinion. But especially when you're trying to understand your community, you want to really separate the difference between things that are facts and things that are opinions or viewpoints. And be wary of things like websites that are talking about buying land or buying homes. Those are trying to sell you something, and you should probably look elsewhere for your information. There's a common misconception that a .org website is not necessarily better than a .com website. Or I'm sorry, that a .org website is better than a .com website, but it's not necessarily. A lot of .org websites, meaning websites that end in .org, are organizations that have very specific perspective and viewpoint, and they may be biased, and they may not be presenting original high quality information. And on the other hand, there are plenty of .com websites that are really high quality, like the New York Times is a .com website. So you really have to evaluate this type of information using the things we were just discussing. You have to use more critical thinking skills rather than just something as easy as whether it's a ending in a .org. Let's talk about searching. Google has a few hacks that are going to be useful for you. For example, this hack allows you to find only websites that end in .gov. And those are usually government websites in America, often federal agencies or federal organizations. There are plenty of those that are local. And this is a really useful way to find this type of information because Google does not automatically bring it up to the top of your search results, usually. So if we search cite, and then the type of domain name we want, in this case, .gov, and then what it is we want to find, it will bring back search results that only end in .gov. Note that there's no space there. We can also do this with an entire website. For example, cite:/auroraillinois.org, and then what we want to find, it will search within just that one website. You can also search by saying file type, and then, for example, PDF, if you would like to find search results that are a PDF. So let's talk about census data. You might say to me, why do I even care about this demographic data that the census has? Well, some of it you might expect, things like age, ethnicity, whether someone is a veteran, but there's more interesting information as well, things like the language that's spoken at home, the educational attainment, the housing that they live in, their living arrangement, even the number and type of businesses in a community. When we are searching the website, it's linked in the research guides, but it's also found here, data.census.gov. We put in the place we're looking for and be very mindful that there may be other towns or communities with the same name as you. Of course, we don't want to find Aurora, Colorado. So anytime we're searching, whether online elsewhere or here, we want to be mindful to make sure we're looking at the one in Illinois. So I will say Aurora, Illinois, and when I search, I will get a lot of search results. I can choose to filter these using the filters on the left side. I particularly encourage you to take advantage of the topics so you can dive into these different themes like housing or income and poverty, employment. There's also on the right side, you'll find a city profile, which will allow you to get an overview of the city. Now, you'll notice, say, under populations and people, we have the total population, but then underneath that, you see P1, 2020 decennial census. So what that's telling us is the source of that information is this census. It's the one you may think of when you think of the census. But the reality is that there's a lot of other information available through this web portal. And it gives us this P1, which is a link to the full table. So we could go see all the details that of this information beyond just the summary they gave us. So for example, here you see 2021 American Community Survey 1-year estimate, which means that they collected this data in 2021 as part of the American Community Survey, another really important tool. And then they've extrapolated from that. They've sort of made a educated guess about what that information looks like now. If we were to click in to the full information of one of those, if we would see what's called a table, it looks like this. You'll see this one is about educational attainment. On the left side, you'll see the full list of tables, and you can choose to close it if you want to see everything all at once. Now, the important thing with this is to really slow down and read what is being presented to you. So we have age by educational attainment, and we're looking at the population 18 to 24-year-old. So you'll see they break down the number of people who have different levels of education, and they show you a margin of error for that information, especially since it's an estimate. This is useful. But if it's too much for you, you're welcome to click the button above and it'll turn it off, remove it from the table. You can also scroll, and in fact, you really should scroll. In this case, we can scroll left to right, and we can also scroll up and down. This is super important because if we were to go over more, we would see not only just the total number of people in this age group who have less than a high school degree, but we would see which amount of them are female and which amount of them are male and which amount of them are veterans. And if we were to scroll down, we would find, again, much more information. So we don't want to cut ourselves short by not scrolling to see everything that's there. You can download the Excel file or the CSV, depending on what you want to do with this data. But I find that for most students, just looking at this information and writing it down is enough. Now, if you are working on a neighborhood, say a Chicago neighborhood is a common one, It's important to note that neighborhoods are not perceived by the census, and so you'll have to do a different type of research in order to find information about those. I'll talk about it a little bit more at the end, and there is a section in the research guide specifically for researching Chicago neighborhoods. But the smallest community segment that is measured by the census is known as a census tract. And if you want to find information on that level, you then need to figure out what the tract is. And then you could use the geography tool on the left side and input the census tract, or the tracts, plural. So I will do a demonstration of that at the end of this, but for now I want to jump into the other really important resource, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. This will give us workforce data. Some of that may feel obvious to you, things like unemployment and, on the flip side, employment. But there are also numbers like, for example, the labor force, which is a number based on criteria an economist came up with. So for certain age group, people with certain characteristics that they believe can work should they want to. Looking at the difference between the labor force and those who are either unemployed unemployed, meaning that they're trying to be employed, and employed, helps you realize the segment of the population that is choosing not to work. That can tell you a lot about, for example, things like childcare, disabilities, other types of issues that may come up. You can also learn more about the industries in your community. Where are people working? What types of jobs do they have? What types of businesses are in your community? And you'll also see things like in the screenshot here, like the energy prices, an economic summary about your area, things like that. But you'll notice that when I'm on the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics website and I look for Aurora, Illinois, this screenshot that I have here is the closest that I can get in the Illinois information page. It shows the Chicago, Naperville, Elgin area, or sometimes they just refer to it as the Chicago area. This information is still useful to me, even though it's a bit broad. However, there is a way to search a little bit more specifically. So this website is linked on the research guide. It's bls.gov. There is, under the data tab, a data finder tool. This is considered to be a beta tool, but I've never had any issues with it. You can go to it directly using the link at the bottom of this screen, beta.bls.gov/data query. And when I searched for Aurora, Illinois, I got information about Aurora, Illinois. So this graph that I have screenshotted for you shows the labor force from 2000 to 2022. This gives me quite a bit of information about how my community has evolved. So let's go ahead and look at the resources online in person. So I'm on the Phillips Library website, and if I was actually one step further back, you would see that there is this research button. When I click that, it takes me to this full list of resources, and I can scroll down to my subject area, in this case, social work, and I'll find different social work classes here. So social work 4010 and social work 6382. Both have really very similar information. So here we have the link to the Census Bureau, as well as a way to look up the census tract. We also have the workforce information linked under economic data, and we have these Chicago neighborhoods. Like I said, these resources will be super essential to you if that is what you are wanting to research. So let's take a look at the Census Bureau quickly. So it loads in looking a little bit like this, and we can choose to search for Aurora, Illinois. You'll notice that we are going to get some suggestions. See Aurora Township, Kane County, but I'm going to go with the city. As it loads in, we will see the filters on the left side here. Remember, there are these topic filters. It'll give us an overarching piece of information in the center, a list of all the tables. You can see we have 3,180, so quite a few. And on the right side, this city profile. Let's start with the city profile. I'm going to click into it. And we can scroll through to learn some information. It sometimes takes a moment to load because there is so much information. Here you can see a population pyramid by age and sex. So we have, for example, quite a lot of men who are in this age range, 40 to 44, 35 to 39, but even more in the 10 to 14 age range. If we wanted to take a closer look at this, underneath it we have the source, and I'm going to click into this table. As you can see, we have options on the left here. It's showing us all kinds of different, well, really all of the tables that came up when we did our search. Underneath the one that we are on, this age and sex table, there's this little plus that says view all 23 products. This will allow us to see different years in the past. So if you wanted to see a different year's worth of information, you could click into that. I'm going to minimize it for right now so that we can focus on this information. So in front of us, we have a relatively simple table. It doesn't look like you can scroll to the left as much here. Or no, actually, perhaps you can. One moment. I can't see it, but I can tell that there's more over here. Oh, here it is. Here we go. So as we scroll to the right, you're going to see things like the percentages instead of just the raw numbers. Like I said, we can choose to turn off the margin of error if we want to reduce the amount of columns we have there. And when we scroll down, we will see more information. You can also choose to search for a specific topic in addition to your location. So if I typed in Aurora, Illinois education, it would bring up a table about that topic. But had I been in the all category, it would show me an overview as well as a list of all of the tables. When you see these products, it's always going to default to the most recent one. Now, if we want to research our economic data, we would go over here and we could choose, for example, this Illinois labor statistics. And you'll see that it only gives us a short list of options for the areas. In this case, this is the most accurate option, Chicago, Naperville, Arlington Heights. So that's what I've clicked into. From here, you will see either tables or economic summaries or news releases that you can view up closer. And then when you scroll down, you'll get an overview of the data. However, like I said, there is a way to search a little bit more specifically. So under data tools, you will use this data finder. Like I said, this is a beta option, but it has always worked very well for me. So I will search for Aurora, Illinois. And you'll notice that I get a response that is specific to Aurora, Illinois in each of these counties, but I really just want an overview. So I'm going to go into, we'll say, employment for the entire city. I can then choose the start year. So perhaps I would like to see it from 2000. Update that. And you can now see this graph, which has a lot of very telling information about dips and surges in the economy and employment in Aurora. Going back to this research guide, there is a citations link here that will give you information about how to cite census data. And as you find other types of data, like perhaps the workforce data, you can then use resources like Purdue OWL to research which resource is actually, or how to cite that type of resource. So as we get to this page, what we're looking for will be information about formatting and style in the 7th edition. And so we can find different types of things, perhaps electronic sources. We can scroll through and find different types of resources. So just a regular old web page is probably not as specific versus, let's see if we can find like a government website, or I'm sorry, a government report or data. Data sets is one option here. Let's see. And there's also a section in here for interviews, which will be another thing that may be part of your community research. How do you cite that? Well, there's information about how to do so. Of course, an interview is not likely going to be an electronic resource. Let's see. Other non-print sources may be our source that we really need here. Yeah, interviews. How do you cite that interview? And we will find all kinds of other things in here, and we will use the correct category to cite our information. When in doubt, the Academic Support Center is a wonderful resource that I highly encourage you to take advantage of. You can make a reference, or I'm sorry, you can make an appointment with one of their writing tutors to help with you with your writing, synthesizing your information, organizing your information, as well as those citations. So let's talk briefly about Chicago neighborhoods, or any neighborhood. If you want to find your census tract, that's the smallest segment of census data, the smallest geographic region, you would click a link that looks like that to then search by a street or an address, a street number, and house name. Oh gosh, a street number, street an address. I apologize for stumbling over my words here. You would search by an address and it would tell you where that address is, which census tract it's in. But like I said, the Chicago neighborhoods, as you can imagine, the people who cares? The people who care about the data in Chicago neighborhoods is the Chicago community, the Chicago government. And so there are resources from both of those, the community and government organizations, specific to neighborhoods, as well as a list of census tract for each Chicago neighborhood. This is created by someone who is well trusted by the community, who's been doing this for years, the Chicago data guy, Rob Peral. However, I have not independently confirmed whether these are accurate. You'll also find crime data like this FBI Crime Data Explorer. This is something that local criminal justice agencies submit data to voluntarily, and it may be a summary or synthesis. You're likely to get more specific data by, again, going to the original source. Who cares about this? I'm guessing the actual organization that is collecting the data themselves. And if you want to research things like the politics in the area, who do they vote for? What kinds of issues are important to them? We have some resources to help you do that. Most of these are geared towards voters themselves, but it should still get you the information that you need. There's so much more to be said and so much more to do. However, I think that this will give you the essential information that you need to succeed. So today we talked about starting with known and reliable sources, things that we can already trust, including some of the ones that are linked on the research guide, as well as the idea of reflecting on who cares about this topic and going to those organizations. If you need help, you can get help with your research after, but also feel very welcome to talk to a librarian. This is our expertise area, finding high quality information. We may not know exactly where to find it ourselves, but we can help you find it by using the tools at our disposal and our knowledge of the types of ways to search and techniques for finding information. But that also means that as you're searching, you may sometimes feel frustrated, and that's okay. That's part of this process. This information does need to be found. It's scattered, and your job, your task is to try to find what's important and create some meaning out of it. If you need help, there's a chat button on our website that allows you to live chat with librarians. We are available every day of the week. We are open until midnight, Monday through Thursday, as well as Sunday, and we are so happy to help. There's also a help button where you can submit a request for help, and we will respond via email. And there is a research button that will allow you to go to those research guides for this class or another class in the future. And you can make an appointment to work with us one-on-one, either online, over Zoom, or in person. We have 30-minute or hour-long appointments, and you can make those on Academic Support Net. It is linked on the library website if you were to scroll down a little further, and it's also linked through your Okta. It's the same place where you would make an appointment with a writing tutor or reserve a library study room. You just need to choose the schedule for research with a librarian. I hope that this has been helpful for you. Please feel free to reach out with any questions. And of course, we will be more than happy to help you troubleshoot your specific community and your specific topic of interest. Take care.